John, joined by someone who I think is even busier than you and me put together. That's our friend Ken Rosenthal.
Yeah, I certainly want to hear all his opinions on baseball, the beanball. At least it was in my opinion. All the teams that played in the LCS, the two teams remaining in the World Series. But I've got to ask him how and why he does this the way he does it. He must work at least 20 hours a day. Incredible. So looking forward to talking to our friend Kenny.
Yeah, I actually think he works 25 hours a day because it's physically impossible and he's physically impossible. We'll ask him all those questions, John. You and I will talk about what just happened in the LCS. We'll preview the World Series. We'll do hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, we're right in that middle ground. You covered the NLCS, I covered the ALCS. We'll be meeting at the World Series in Arlington for games 1 and 2. Just your general opinion of LCS ending and the World Series we've got.
Yeah, well, the LCSs were great. I mean, after a slow start to this postseason, I think we had two great LCS. We had a surprise where I am. I don't think anybody expected the Diamondbacks, certainly not to get this far, but to beat the Phillies here in Philadelphia, 2 straight games, and where you were, obviously the fight always enhances things in a way. It certainly creates more interest, and Adolis Garcia stamped himself as a superstar. So 2 great LCS, and interesting what's going to happen in the World Series. Nobody had this predicted, I'm sure. Somebody told me the Rangers were 75-1 to start the year, and the Diamondbacks were 200-1 or something like that. So, I mean, if anybody had that, contact me and I'll give you a job. But I certainly didn't. I went to Angels and Padres, so I had it all wrong. In this case, I've been following the Diamondbacks. I do think it's kind of a crapshoot. To me, they're the hot team. They killed the Dodgers. They swept the Brewers, and they beat a hot Phillies team. So I think they may win this.
Yeah, look, you're doing well here, John. You're offering a job to someone. So apparently, Chris Russo is quitting his job because the Diamondbacks actually made the World Series. But I
don't think he'll be doing that.
We should expect it, John. I don't think that's happening. We should expect it. Because I do think we try so hard because we want to believe that there are people who can handle this time of year. And I do think there are people who can handle this time of year, like Nathan Eovaldi, Montgomery showing he can, Zach Wheeler, etc. But that it is essentially a crapshoot. The Diamondbacks very much remind me of a team that's probably of both of our youth. The 1973 Mets were 82-79. They were in last place in August. They rallied. They beat the Big Red Machine when the playoffs were shorter. They took a great dynasty A's team to 7 games. The 06 Cardinals, again, a team we're familiar with for a variety of reasons. The Mets were the dominant team in the National League that year. The Cardinals only won 83 games that year. They won the World Series. I mean, that Cardinal team had 2 8-game losing streaks and a 7-game losing streak and a losing September and got in and got hot at the right time. John, we want to believe it's not a crapshoot, but it's kind of a crapshoot.
Yeah, first of all, I want to congratulate you for naming 3 players that can produce in the clutch. Montgomery, Eovaldi, and Wheeler, all former New York players. I don't know if you did that on purpose.
Top of mind? Is that how?
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. I don't know, because there are other players who can perform, but you named 3 good ones, obviously. I
named Harper, would you be the latest to point out that the Yankees didn't sign him?
Yes, I wrote a column on that 10 days ago when I got here. That was my first thought. We tend toward the provincial, which I understand. The fans are the fans of the New York teams at the Post. So generally, I do think it is a crapshoot. If you win 100 and you win 9, one team wins 100, one team wins 90. Then over 7 games, it's now a sprint instead of a marathon. It's probably close to 50-50. I mean, I was stunned when the Reds swept the A's in 1990, but there are so many examples of that at this point, and it's taken me a while. I'm over 60 years. I do believe it is generally a crapshoot. I do think those Yankee teams, I mean, when you have a rotation of Pettit and Cone and Wells and Clemens and on and on, that is an advantage. And that kind of makes it not quite a crapshoot. But of course, we probably would have said that about the Braves too, right? With Smoltz and Glavine and Maddox. They didn't have that fourth grade pitcher very long as Avery got hurt. But you would think that that would give them an advantage, and it really didn't. They won one time, and they were in the playoffs all those years. What, it was 14 years in a row they won the division. So I think it's generally pretty close to a crapshoot, but you got to get in, and obviously the New York teams didn't get in. So
yeah, look, I think those Yankee teams, John, they defied things to win those 3 championships in a row, 98 to 2000. You got to win 9 straight series, which they did. You start stretching it back to 96 also when they won, to 2001 when they won multiple rounds to get to Game 7. They really were an amazing group. And I think it was about that starting pitching. It never mattered where a series ended, right? If it ended on El Duque, then they opened with Pettit. If it ended with Pettit, they opened with Wells. If it ended with Wells, Clemens. They had really good setup guys who seemed, Mendoza underrated, Stanton underrated, Jeff Nelson, besides the great Rivera. And I think they had a very connective tissue lineup where nobody felt like they had to be the star. Like, I think once they brought in Giambi and A-Rod and people who felt like it's about me, if I don't perform well, we're going to lose. I think that team believed so much in the group that nobody felt specific pressure, like if I fail, it's out. And I actually think the Astros have been a lot like that these 7 years. Lots of good starting pitchers, lots of good relievers, lots of length in the lineup. But at some point, it is hard to win series.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned El Duque. He was incredible in the postseason. And it really was the whole staff, as you mentioned, with the Nelson and certainly Mariano Rivera at the end. So, I mean, yeah, you can avoid it being a crapshoot if you get 11 pitchers who are all fantastic. And of course, today that would cost you about $500 million just for the rotation and the bullpen. So even Steve Cohen's not going to spend $500 million on the pitching staff. So it may not be possible at this point. Those Yankee teams were special. The Astro teams were outstanding. I think they had beyond the pitching, they had a collection of position players who really enjoyed the moment, including Correa. Now, Pena was the MVP last year, so he obviously was great last year in the postseason. But to have Altuve, Correa, for some of that time, Springer, Bregman, Tucker, they had a fantastic core of position players. So it can be done that way as well, but not to the degree that the Yankees were winning 4 championships and almost a 5th. And I've been around the Diamondbacks a lot, and certainly there's a lot of talk, and all the highlights are still about the 0-1 team. And to beat that Yankee team, it took 2 really Hall of Fame pitchers, although Schilling didn't get in due to his personality. Schilling and Johnson, and Johnson came in relief in the last. I see the highlights every day when I go in Arizona. It took a lot to beat them, but it's hard to put together a team like that. And it was an amazing team. I'm not sure we're going to see it again anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm sure Randy Johnson got in because of his winning personality. I'll say one other thing just about the Diamondbacks, and I get it's a crapshoot, but I also have to say I'm shocked. I get there are a lot of good players, and John, this is the provincial matter once again, because they played 2 series in New York in late September. They lost 3 or 4 at Citi Field. They lost 2 or 3 at Yankee Stadium to obviously the 2 New York teams. And they looked lousy doing them. I think it was 7 games. I think I was at 5 of them. And they just did not look good playing baseball in late September. So I go back again, that Cardinal team in 06 limped into the playoffs. I guess I should have learned the lesson. But after being in the ballpark for those 2 series, if you would have said this team is going to win 3 rounds to get to the World Series, I would have said no way. I mean, Kevin Ginkel had to be pulled from a game. He couldn't throw the ball near the plate. And then I'm watching the decisive game of the playoffs, and he's the best relief pitcher in the game.
Yeah. Well, all the relief pitchers look great right now. I mean, it may depend on the city. I mean, Chicago, they eliminated the Cubs basically single-handedly, beating them, I think, 6 out of 7 in September. Beat the White Sox. Not that was that difficult. But, yeah, I mean, they certainly are up and down. They're a young team, as Baltimore was. Baltimore was the young team that I think people thought could really take hold in October based on the fact that they had played so great through the 162. But I'm here to tell you, Arizona looks pretty good right now, and I would not be surprised if they win at this point. Of course, nobody predicted them to win this series. Nobody predicted them to beat Milwaukee. They never beat the Dodgers. They are destroyed by the Dodgers every single time they played up until this time, and they turned it around and they killed Kershaw. They, obliterated Mookie. They frustrated Freddie. I mean, these guys did nothing against them. I mean, nobody even thought they'd beat Milwaukee to begin with. It is pretty amazing. I do think whether they saw it coming or not, being young and athletic was an advantage this year because, frankly, nobody thought they were going to even win 84 games. And Corbin Carroll is a special player. And you know who else is a special player? You'll know this since you watched 5 games. Is this Gabriel Moreno? I mean, he is terrific. Offensively, defensively. He's their number 3 hitter now. I mean, is he Freddie Freeman? Is he Seager? Is he Harper? No, but I mean, we saw him hit a home run that was called foul and then hit another home run. He is quite a competitor. Got knocked on the head in the Milwaukee series. Got beat around in this series. Harper sliding home kind of gave him a forearm shiver. Good play sliding in as he was kind of blocking the plate. Just got up and kept playing. And so, I mean, they do have 2 stars, even if, people I think who follow baseball know Carroll. Moreno is going to be a revelation in this World Series, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah, the NLCS remind me, and this is not a defense of the Yankees, the Brian Cashman administration. They've done a bad job for the last 3 years in particular. But, you watch Moreno and Gurriel and you realize Toronto traded those guys for Varsho, who probably will end up being a better player than he was this year, but he wasn't very good. You watch Adolis Garcia, the Cardinals, who have generally been a good organization, just let him go. By the way, even the Rangers took him off the 40-man roster at some point. He was the ALCS MVP, as was Randy Arozarena a few years ago, another ex-Cardinal. Zach Gallen's in this World Series. He was part of a trade with Sandy Alcantara that the Cardinals made. There's just a lot of bad moves out there, and the good organizations do find a way to overcome. The Dodgers traded Yordan Alvarez for Josh Fields. And, I watched Yordan Alvarez. It's the closest thing to David Ortiz I've seen, where I'm just like utterly blown away in October when he doesn't hit the ball hard and get a hit.
Yeah, I'm convinced he's the best hitter in baseball. I would have said Freeman coming in, and obviously I'm not going to judge anything against Freeman that he had a bad series, but Alvarez, nobody could get him out. And I'm glad you pointed out it's not only the Yankees that let go good players. The Dodgers, the Cardinals, and these are very good. They're all very good organizations. Yes. I mean, the Yankees, as much as we knocked them, and you and I have knocked them a lot over the past couple months, they haven't had a losing season in how many? Has it been 3 decades? I don't know, something like that.
Since '92, right?
All right, so yeah, your memory's better than mine. Amazing. So even good organizations make bad moves, and I will pay a little bit of tribute to the Diamondback organization. Mike Hazen, they're good people and they do a great job, and he's very emotional after the game. Again, last night he lost his wife, very unfortunate, to brain cancer in her middle age. Very sad. A lovely woman by all accounts, a huge, obviously, Diamondback fan, very enthusiastic, and and kind of a spunky, I didn't know her, but kind of a spunky gal. From one of the stories about how a player sent the condolences while she was still battling the brain cancer through Mike and a text, and Mike relayed it to her, and he said, "Is there anything I can do for you?" And her answer was, "Just play effing better." That was her answer. So, it's very sad, and with 4 boys, and it was nice to see on a personal level Mike Hazen, who we know is a great guy for years, help pull off this, what everyone will say is a miracle. I'm not sure it's a miracle, but it's a incredible achievement.
Yeah, John, probably the center story from the 2 LCS was the hit by pitch, Abreu Garcia, Game 5 in Arlington. Led to both of their injections in that game. Also, Dusty Baker There was adjudication, a 2-game suspension, then an appeal. The 2 games go to next year. Let me just throw out what I thought. I was in the ballpark that night. What I thought happened. I thought it was a Roger Clemens, which was Abreu was coming up and in, and if he hit him, he was fine. Like I don't mean to be wishy-washy. I don't think he didn't not hit him. I didn't think he hit him on purpose. I just thought I'm going to throw it up and in there. And if it's a message, it's a message. And if it hits him, I'm fine with it. But once MLB decides that it was on purpose, that their decision, doesn't matter what I think, then he has to miss games in this ALCS if
Absolutely.
possible. And I thought that was the mistake there, was to push it to next year. The event happened here, and you could have done something to punish them from being. And it didn't matter. Houston lost Game 7. Garcia was great again in Game 7, 6 and 7.
Right.
They needed to win. But
Yeah,
that was
Abreu
my
was not.
I don't think it was on purpose, but I think he was okay with it. And I think MLB should have made the punishment this postseason.
Yeah, I'm already on record. I'm not going to be wishy-washy. I mean, I'm watching on TV. You and Ken Rosenthal, our guest, were there. To me, it looked obvious that he threw at him, and I think the punishment was deserved. And it was 2 games, so 2 games is obviously about the postseason. So to make it about next year, you basically you've found him guilty and given him a parking ticket type fine. So to me, it made no sense. I didn't get it at all, and I don't think the guy's. First of all, his reaction was when he was thrown out was like, okay, that I deserved it. That's what it looked like to me. I mean, I know Dusty was upset, but Dusty's not inside his head, and I understand he's defending his player and his team, and I get that. And but to me, it was like, all right, I'm thrown out. I didn't see any reaction from him. And then later, when he's asked about it, he mentioned how pissed off he was that he was back in the clubhouse. I mean, if you're testifying that you're not temperamental, that probably wasn't the right thing to say. I thought the guy was clearly guilty, and he got off the hook. So I think ultimately, justice was not served.
Yeah, John, you mentioned our guest is going to be Ken Rosenthal. Before we bring him in, we'll be talking a lot about the World Series, including on our show next week, which will be kind of right in the middle of this fall classic. Why don't we deal just quickly with the 2 teams that were eliminated here, because they played in the World Series last year, the Astros and the Phillies. First thing you think about when you think about the Astros moving forward?
Well, I mean, they have Bregman and they've got Altuve, who are going to be free agents after next year, and we'll see if they try to keep the band together. I'm in Philadelphia right now. Keeping the band together did not work for the Phillies. They'd been in the World Series in 08, 09. We know they won in 08, lost in 09, and they just kept going south slowly. They got to the World Series, then the next year they got to the Championship Series. Next year they got to the second round. Next year the first. It went on and on like that until they eventually were not very good. So sometimes keeping the old band together doesn't work. My feeling at this point is they'll probably be more apt to keep Altuve, who's at this point, to me, a certain Hall of Famer and clearly a forever Astro. And he signed 2 deals already that were long deals, and he clearly would like to be an Astro, I think. And Bregman had hired Scott Boras. Altuve also has Scott Boras, but Bregman has hired Scott Boras. He's a free agent, and I'm not sure. I mean, I thought he was going to be a Hall of Famer. He's still an outstanding player. Is he in the Machado Arenado class? Not at the moment, not right now, but I could see him leaving a little bit more. But those are the 2 guys that come to mind when you ask about their future.
I think in their immediate future, and there was reporting out of the World Series by the Athletic that Dusty Baker is probably not coming back. So they have to hire that job, and it's obviously a very important job. But I dare say that the team that made the ALCS, at least the ALCS, the last 7 seasons, that they should be the favorite to do it again next year. They didn't play with Lance McCullers this year. They should probably get him back. Luis Garcia hardly pitched. Jose Abreu clearly in year 1 put a lot of pressure on himself in Houston and was a much better player down the stretch and in the playoffs. I think that's kind of who he is. They have Verlander for the whole season. They're going to be one of the teams that goes into this offseason that doesn't need starting pitching. And that's a real blessing because there's not a lot of it, and the bidding up on it's going to be crazy. And I think that they could go and try to maybe find another bat someplace along the line. I think they're going to be really good next year, and the problems begin in 25. To your point, do they keep? I think to your point also, I think they keep Altuve. He's an historic player for them. Bregman, who I think is a great player, a great clutch player on both sides of the ball. That's tougher than Tucker the year after, and Valdez are even tougher, I think, signs for them. But I don't see it going away next year as long as they do well with the managers. With the Phillies, I think the wild card, John, is that their owner, John Middleton, has shown clearly in a Steve Cohn-esque way with a little less put into it, I will do whatever I have to. I'm not looking to make money here. I'm looking to make this joy for me, the team, the city. So they're wild cards into this offseason because they either have to keep Nola, who's a free agent, or replace him.
Yeah, Middleton's a great owner. I mean, he's on the field every game, talking to the writers every single day. So we love that. He's really into it. He was a fan forever. He knows the details. He's got that kind of Chris Russo sense of what happened in what point of every game that the Phillies ever played. I find that incredible because I can't do that. But he is a terrific fan. He made the right move, even though they didn't win this time. Bryce Harper is the perfect guy for Philly. That was a better call for this town than Manny Machado. He has been a great owner. They will do what it takes. I hear they were far apart with Nola. He's obviously going to get a 9-figure deal, probably 150 plus at this point. He was fantastic in the postseason, except for that last game. Going to be interesting to see what Dave Dombrowski does because he obviously spends, Middleton spends. Dombrowski has done more great things than mistakes, but obviously Chris Sale, who he signed for that $150 million in Boston, that didn't work. Is that a cautionary tale? Nola has been a great pitcher. He has thrown a lot of innings. That's kind of a double-edged sword. Very reliable guy, but then people are going to say, how many innings does he have left? But I think he's a fantastic pitcher and he wants to stay, so not going to be surprised if he does stay. As far as Dusty goes, yeah, we've written a couple times that he and the front office really weren't jibing this year. The analytics, and it's been going on for a couple of years now. They won last year, despite the difference of opinion. Dusty did seem to get his way. I mean, he did make the calls. They did allow him to play Martin Maldonado every game, right? There's no analytics person that would have Maldonado play, but he wanted to make the pitchers comfortable. I get it. I don't blame him. They obviously have another catcher, a young catcher with 20 home runs in Diaz. But he did get his way, but I mean, it's probably wearing after a while. And I think he told a lot of people that he intended to leave at the end of the year. Will he manage somewhere else? I don't see him as a Met due to the analytics situation. But I wouldn't put it past him to take another job somewhere. He's a young 70-something. We thought Bruce Bochy was retired. He obviously came back and he's doing a great job. So maybe he walks away and maybe surfaces somewhere else later. He was the perfect guy for the Astros, though. I mean, they changed the narrative, and he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he will be in the Hall of Fame. He's great at his job. If this is it, he's an historic manager. Someone else who's great at their job is Ken Rosenthal, who does a lot of different jobs, wears a lot of different hats, and he'll join us next on the show. John and I are so appreciative that our colleague, our friend, Ken Rosenthal is joining us on the show. Ken, I know we're tight on time, so I'll just try to limit Fox on-field World Series. You write your great column for The Athletic. You have your podcast, the online stuff with Fair Territory, Foul Territory. I'm sure I could go on for longer. It is the busy time of the year where we have that confluence of postseason, World Series about to begin, and all the off-season work. Why don't we start here? We write so much and we try so much to write about how this is not a crapshoot this time of year. And we have the Rangers and the Diamondbacks, both of whom lost 100 games not long ago. And Arizona just won 84 games this season and upset everybody on the way. Is it a crapshoot?
Pretty close. It's pretty close to a crapshoot. And when you expand the playoffs, you invite more teams in, you invite more randomness, and you have the possibility of such an outcome. And guys, I'll refer to our friend Jason Stark, who I spoke with a couple of weeks ago about this whole situation. And Jason said, listen, unless you go back to what the sport once was, which was the best regular season record in each league going to the World Series, you have the possibility of upsets. Playoffs give you the possibility of upsets. So when we have playoffs, we can't be upset when there are upsets. It's just the kind of the way things are. And that's what we've seen in these playoffs in particular. The Rangers were a really good team all season. There's no question about that. The Diamondbacks are a surprise. They were an 84-win team, as you said, Joel. But I know people are going to necessarily not be thrilled with this matchup. I am excited by it. I'm excited to see new teams. We hear people complain every single year. Same teams. You're shoving the Yankees and Red Sox down our throats. The Dodgers, the Astros, no more. Hey, here you are. You've got new teams. I'm not just saying this as someone who works for Fox. If you're a baseball fan, you should watch.
Well, you certainly do seem excited. I wonder about nationally, though, what people are going to think. Is this, I mean, we expect low ratings now because people really don't follow the Diamondbacks. It's not a small market, but it's not a team that's followed. Is this bad for baseball?
I don't know that I would say it's bad for baseball or bad for Fox, which of course is broadcasting the games, but is it the sexiest matchup that's going to draw the highest ratings? I would probably assume that is not the case. What's interesting to me, John, is that you said it. Phoenix is one of the 10 biggest cities in the country. Dallas-Fort Worth, one of the 10 biggest markets in the country. And yet, yes, you would expect that this is not going to get a big rating because you don't have one of the coastal teams involved. That said, the one thing about the World Series where there is a chance for a better rating down the line is the possibility of going 6 and 7 games and having some drama. If we have another Adolis Garcia type drama, for instance, people are going to watch. I'm not saying I'm encouraging fights, but things happen in the course of a series that get people more interested. And maybe that happens in this series, maybe it doesn't. But I would not rule out the possibility of more people watching than maybe we would think.
Ken, you don't have to do it. I'm the one who usually does it. I'm encouraging fights for the rest of the culture, maybe one a game. What as a way to kind of sell it, not just because of Fox, because we're all baseball fans. Sell the World Series. Why should people be interested in Texas Rangers, Arizona Diamondbacks?
Well, the turnarounds are one reason. You guys said it. 100 lost teams not that long ago. The Rangers have not been in the World Series since 2011. They've never won one. The Diamondbacks have not been in the World Series since 2001. They won that one. It's their only World Series triumph. It was a great 7-game series against the Yankees. So these are new teams. And there are stars on both sides. Adolis Garcia is a star. Corey Seager, we've seen him in October before. He is a star. Max Scherzer will be part of this. Nathan Eovaldi, Jordan Montgomery, Marcus Semien. A lot of these guys are interesting. This is Semien's first World Series. On the other side, kind of the counterpart of Semien in my mind, is Evan Longoria, who was in his first World Series in 15 years. They've got stars too. Not as big names perhaps as the Rangers, but Ketel Marte, kind of an underrated star. Corbin Carroll is going to be the Rookie of the Year, an exciting player, had a great game last night. Merrill Kelly and Zach Gallen, legitimate 1-2. We saw their bullpen kind of shine last night, Ginkel and Sewald. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting baseball. And the Diamondbacks, because they run and they do some things that are kind of capitalizing on the new rules, that makes them kind of a prototype for maybe going forward too. So there is a lot here. It's a lot more than maybe people think. There's Bruce Bochy, who of course is in his 5th World Series. I can go on, and I don't mean to oversell, but there are things here that are compelling.
You know, since it is a crapshoot, at least I think it's a crapshoot, and you said it's pretty close to a crapshoot. I'm going to, of course, put you on the spot and ask you who's going to win, but shouldn't we just all bet the underdog from now on? I mean, I think mathematically, if you got a 100-win team and a 90-win team, and that's not exactly here, you got a 90 and an 84, over 7 games, it pretty much is 50-50.
John, great point. And I think I saw a stat from Sarah Langs this morning saying that the road teams are 22-14. In other words, the lower seeds are 22-14 in this postseason. I mean, where's the home field advantage? It's not there. And the Phillies, we thought had the greatest home field advantage ever. Could not be beaten in the bank. Well, they got beat. Final 2 games, they were up 3-2, lose the next 2 at home to lose the series. So I don't know what to make of that. probably this is random to some degree, and it would not necessarily be repeated, but it's happening this year, and it's been quite an unusual playoff because of that.
Yeah, I also find almost equally interesting. You just mentioned it there. The Phillies were eliminated and the Astros were eliminated. That was the World Series last year. The two teams in the LCS who were eliminated. Britt Giroli of the Athletic reported that it looks like he's not going to come back as Dusty Baker's not going to come back as manager. Why don't we handle the Astros for me? They've been 7 straight ALCS. They have an terrific core that will probably again include Lance McCullers and Garcia at some point next year back into their rotation. Where do you think they are? Are they still an ascendant team, or are they just about to tip off the side of the mountain with the maybe a rising Rangers and Mariners in the West?
Joel, it's interesting. I said on the broadcast during Game 7 that they're at an interesting crossroads. Altuve and Bregman are free agents after this year. They're both represented by Scott Boras. Scott Boras' clients generally do not sign extensions because they want market value. They want to go to free agency. So it's not going to be easy to keep those guys. Then you've got Tucker and Framber Valdez, free agents after 25, and Verlander as well. So I'm not sure where this is going. Their farm system is not great. The Mets took 2 of their best prospects for Verlander, and it wasn't a great farm system to begin with. So they always seem to find ways, and you're right. They've got Altuve and Alvarez and others going forward, and Garcia and McCullers coming back. Jeremy Pena is going to be a better player than he's shown. They have a good core, but they are kind of at a tipping point in some ways, and it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate this, because they've navigated everything else for the last 7 years. The loss of Correa, the loss of Springer, loss of various others. But now we're getting to the point where you're potentially losing some really important players on that team. Not that those guys weren't, but Altuve's been central to all of this, and really Bregman has been too.
I'm going to go off the board a little bit on this question, and I think you're going to disagree with me on this. And again, the series is over, so if some people say it's not going to matter, but I'm still getting hundreds of tweets that I'm an idiot and I hate the Astros. And I think you don't think that Abreu threw at Garcia, but I thought it was obvious that he threw at him. Number one. Number two, I don't get the decision. They basically let him off the hook. If you think he threw at him, don't you have to punish him? And particularly against the Rangers, if you don't, overrule it. You should have 2 choices: either get rid of the penalty or let it stand, or if you think it's too harsh, cut it to 1 game. And there was only 1 game left to make it. The reason it was 2 games is because it was in the playoffs. If someone throws at somebody in the regular season, it's 7 games or 10 games or something like that. So to me, he was let off the hook. To me, let him off the hook if you think he's innocent, but they obviously didn't. So you go ahead, because I know you probably disagree with me.
Well, I disagree with you on the intent question. I just can't bring myself to think that he did it on purpose, because I don't see any logical reason for him doing it on purpose. Now, John, that said,
human nature.
Well, that said, it's baseball, and
yeah,
everyone has various opinions. I've heard from a ton of people who agree with you that basically told me, Ken, you're an idiot.
No, I'm not telling you that.
You're not saying that, but I mean, other people say that.
Okay.
And I get it. There's 2 sides to it. And I certainly see the other side. It's just every time I think about it, I'm like, well, why would he do it at that moment in the game situation? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, as for the penalty, frankly, I think MLB caved. They caved because they knew that suspending him for Game 7, when the ejection and suspension were questionable to start with, was not going to be received well and would give the appearance of being unfair. I'm not sure they knew about Jay Howell in 1988 until they were reminded of it. Verducci said it on the broadcast first, but that was the right thing to do, to make him eligible for Game 7, in my opinion. But their basic feeling is postseason discipline is served in the postseason, and that's not what's happening here. So they were inconsistent with that decision. This is one that we can debate for a long time, and I don't know that we'll ever know the truth, but it made for quite an interesting series, put it that way.
Yeah, it changed the drama and probably trauma of the ALCS. John obviously didn't pick up on my thread with the Astros, so I'm going to go. The other team that was in the World Series last year was the Phillies. They got close but no cigar, cliche alert, 2 years in a row. I wonder also, do you think that they have situations coming up? Guys like Wheeler are getting older. Nola is a free agent. Um, you know, uh, are they ascendant? Their owner clearly seems like he's in it to win it. Where do you think the Phillies are moving forward?
They're a little bit more stable in my view than the Astros because they've got more guys under contract. But you don't know where this is going. Nola is going to be a big loss. I know he wasn't the most consistent this year right through the playoffs, but he's been a big part of what they've done. And Joel, every other guy is getting older, right? It's a year. They keep getting older, and in theory, their performance should decline. But I still see them being really good. They've got young pitching coming, which is something the Astros really don't outside of Hunter Brown. And Dombrowski, John Middleton, we know they're going to be aggressive. Not that Jim Crane hasn't, but he's aggressive in his way. Doesn't really do it in free agency, kind of does extensions, but that's it. So I don't know. I see them still being strong, and they have a great way about them, like the Astros do, honestly. So I don't see it falling apart or anything like that, but you guys know this. It gets tougher and tougher, and it's tough to win. It's really hard to win. So many things can go wrong. We saw that with the Mets, the Yankees, the Padres. Maybe next year is a downturn. We'll see.
It was kind of a mixed year in terms of the free agent results. Obviously, the Phillies advanced pretty far. The Rangers still in it. They both spent. The Mets obviously had a bad year. The Padres, though they finally got over 500, had a bad year, and they obviously spent. Does this affect free agency, number one? And number two, while we have you, where do you think Ohtani's going, and how much money does he get?
I don't know that it affects free agency, John. And yes, certain teams did not come out as well as they would have liked after spending a ton of money, but other teams did. You just mentioned it. The Phillies did, the Rangers did. The Rangers, in my view, are a great example of spending on the right guys. They got the right guys. Seager and Simeon, good. Now, DeGrom, obviously, that has not worked out. But Evaldi has, and some other others have. You're not going to hit on all of them. We all know this. I think fans expect teams to succeed with every free agent. It's not realistic. But this is a market that is not the deepest. That's going to cause some issues. There is a good number of starting pitchers that are available on this market that will get a lot of attention. Montgomery is one of them. Nola is another. And there are others beyond that. As for Ohtani, I still believe he gets 500 plus. And I guess I'll bet the Dodgers. It's the chalk, but I just don't know what to think. We don't get any insight from him or his agent or anyone about what he wants, other than he wants to win and he wants a lot of money. Yeah, we know that. But as for his geographic preference, if there is one, as for anything else that might be coming into his mind, it's really hard to know. So I'll go with the Dodgers. They're the chalk, but that's not a very creative or interesting answer.
Yeah, I'm going to throw out, just because I've been thinking about it a lot. The Rangers were planning to be very aggressive to try to get him at the trade deadline.
Yes.
And I just think it would be a great story if him and DeGrom show up in the 2025 rotation for the Texas Rangers as they do this. And obviously, Ohtani would hit next year. So I'm putting them down as a real
I agree with that.
Wild card. I agree, Joel. They win, they kind of get the fever of this. Even if they don't win, they have the fever of this. Their ownership seems to be committed to trying to do some large stuff.
And Young wants to do things, obviously. Yeah. He spent $800 million the last two off seasons. He's not afraid. So this will only embolden them. And yes, the question then would become, does he want to go to Texas? But Texas is not a bad place to live. There's no state tax. You can have a good life there.
You mentioned Young. I think the other thing that's come up a lot, I can't believe we're still here 20 years after Moneyball, is kind of like scout versus analytics. And it seems to me someone like Chris Young is really good at like the middle ground there. But he has what I would term feel. Like I think the Yankees, for example, have lost feel. Yes. And I wonder what you think. Feels like maybe we're going back a different way here, Ken. We're never going away from analytics. But are we trying to find people who have feel?
I hope so. I don't know that the answer is yes. The hiring of Craig Breslow in Boston is interesting from this perspective because He's obviously a really smart guy. He's a Yale guy, just as young as a Princeton guy, right? These guys are bright, but he was a player, a former player. They need to fix their pitching. Here's a guy who was a former pitcher. Feel is really important. And I wrote about this earlier in the the postseason. Feel often is too overlooked now. And we see decisions made that have no feel. So I would hope that it's swinging back that way. It's interesting to me that 3 of the 4 managers in the Final Four were field guys, if you want to call them that, Baker, Bochy, and Rob Thompson. It's not that they ignore analytics. No one ignores analytics. You cannot ignore analytics, but you also make decisions based on other reasons, and you don't script things. You don't pre-plan everything. So the lessons of the sport are pretty obvious. That feel is really important still, maybe even more important because everyone has the analytics. So yeah, I would hope it's going back in that direction. It needs to go back in that direction. I'm not totally convinced.
Speaking of analytics, what do you think the Yankees need to do? 1 or 2 things?
From a player standpoint or from an organizational standpoint?
Whatever you think. Well, how are they going to get better? Because they consider 82 and 80 a disaster. So I think that's a good position to be in, but then again, the fans consider it a disaster as well.
82 and 80, that just means they finished 2 games behind the Diamondbacks.
That's right. Look, hey, they were right there.
They could have been in the crapshoot.
I'm with Joel. They need to show more feel. That's number 1. And whether it's getting rid of certain people, whether it's making different kinds of decisions or putting processes in place to enable you to make different kinds of decisions, that is the number 1 thing they need to do. Because you can go through their moves the last 2 years in particular, but really for quite some time, there's been a lack of feel too often. As for players, I haven't really given it much thought. They need to get younger, more athletic. They need to have more of a left-handed presence. Pitching needs to be adjusted. There's all kinds of things, I think, with the roster. You guys would know better than me that really need to be done.
Well, I got one more question for you, and I'd like it to be about you because I'm fascinated. It appears to me that you work about 23 hours a day.
How you do it, and maybe why do you keep doing it? It's a question actually you and I talk about quite a bit when we're standing around.
Well, first of all, the idea of me working harder than you 2 guys is a little bit of a stretch. You guys work really hard. There are a lot of people in our business who work really hard, and I don't know that I work any harder. Why do I do it? Joel, we have talked about this. I still like it. I like the action. I like being at the park. I kind of like everything about it. Now, of course, in any job, even our jobs, there is a certain amount of BS you have to put up with in different ways, and that can get annoying, but I still really do like it. And my feeling about it is kind of like a player who says they'll have to rip the uniform off me, and that is always inevitable for any player, right? That your career ends. I know my career is going to end just as yours careers are going to end, and I want to get the most enjoyment and the most I can out of it for as long as possible. And at this age, Joel, health becomes an issue and you start to worry about that. But as long as I'm healthy and good, I'll keep going.
All right. And I think John mentioned it earlier, so I'll wrap it up with another, see if I could finish one of his other questions, which is World Series. Who do you got and why?
Yeah, I'm the worst at picking.
I'm here to make sure you can never be worse than second worst.
I had the Padres and Angels at the beginning of the year. Try to top that one.
That's pretty good. I don't even remember who I had at the start of the year.
I had Mariners and Braves, if I remember.
Okay, I'll go with the Rangers. I've been watching them for a couple of weeks now. They can go cold as quickly as they go hot, and we know that, but they just have a certain way about them. Now, anyone watching the Diamondbacks can see that they have a certain way about them too, and that's what's so cool about the series, that these teams have kind of put it together at the right time. But I just like where they are in general, and their lineup. This is the one thing that the Astros talked about at the end of the series. 1 to 9, it's really difficult to get through. And we've seen different guys get hot at different times. Young really hasn't been hot of late. Evan Carter cooled off, and he had a big hit in Game 7. Seager's coming and going. Simeon's not been hot. I just think they have too many weapons.
Yeah, well, you mentioned so many things there, and also in the first question and answer, all these things about the World Series we should watch. I actually mean this sincerely. You and Tom Verducci do a masterclass in actually how to handle sideline reporting, and everyone who does it should watch, or everyone who wants to do it should watch. And we should all watch the World Series anyway. Ken Rosenthal, our friend, thank you for joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure to be with you both.
We want to thank our guest, Ken Rosenthal. John, we always have good conversations with Ken, whether it's standing on the field or now someplace on a podcast. Outside of the LCS before the World Series, give me a hit or an error.
I'm going to give it to the Diamondbacks, crapshoot or not. They lost 110 games 2 years ago. To lose 110 games and then be in the World Series. Now the Orioles did the same and won 100 games, so they probably deserve a hit too, even though they were not good in the postseason. But I mean, great job by the whole front office: Mike Hazen, Allard Baird, Jason McLeod, Amiel Sode. I don't know whether they saw it coming or what, but they got a young, athletic team. Part of the young is because they can't afford anybody else. But I mean, they've got one guy on a big long-term deal, and it's like $75 million or something like that with Ketel Marte. The Phillies have like a half dozen guys who have bigger contracts than that. So, and they have half the payroll at $120 million. The Phillies have $240 million. So I got to give my hit to the Arizona Diamondbacks.
They also did an extension with Carroll for a long time, which is really team friendly. And he feels very much like Adley Rutschman, right? Like they put the stake in the ground with him and became a better team. When you put that kind of great player, two-way player on the field, it changes things. It changed it in Baltimore starting last year into this year, and I think it changed it with the Diamondbacks.
Yeah. I should have said one veteran long-term contract to avoid free agency. They signed Carroll up early. Very, very smart thing to do. I mean, he got over $100 million, which was a record for that level. But I mean, he's a superstar. To see him every day, the speed, the ability to hit the ball, put it in play. He and Marte at the top of the lineup are spectacular. It does feel like the Rangers, not that I'm picking anybody here, but it does feel like the Rangers have a longer lineup at this point than anybody. But Arizona's got a good shot at this, I think, with Marte, with Carroll, with all the youth and the speed, the athleticism, and that bullpen.
Yeah. Look, I'm going to give a hit this week. And this will be, I'll give 3 seconds for Yankee fans too. I would never say shut off the podcast, but you might want it because my hit is for the Astros, who I do think we talked a lot in this show about the crapshoot of it all. To get to 7 LCS, you want to say they cheated in 17? Okay. They've made it since 18. You want to say Jose Altuve was wearing a buzzer? There's no proof of that, whatever. Fine, that was 19. They've made it in 20, 21, 22, 23. They keep coming back. They have great clutch players, and I do mean great clutch players. Bregman, Altuve, Alvarez. The Ryan Presley is maybe the second best relief pitcher in postseason history to Mariano Rivera. The guy never gives up anything in the postseason. They've done it with multiple managers. They've done it with multiple GMs. They really have. This is a remarkable run with as many rounds of the playoffs as there are.
Can't disagree. It's amazing. No matter what you want to say about the trash can, and I will say something that wasn't good, but it is amazing what they've done. And you're right, Bregman is a very good clutch player. He may not be Arenado or Machado, not that far below.
Yeah, no, he's special on both sides of the ball. Can handle the moment. Yeah, I'm and I think just to the point of the trash can, if I was going to say this is, when Robbie Cano got suspended the first time for PEDs, you have the chance to come back and play well and prove, hey, I could have played without it. And then he got busted again. And so now I look and say, like the whole thing feels fraudulent to me. The fact that the Astros, like they outran the trash cans, they outran the buzzer, and they're like, I've got to assume they're the most watched team by the other team, and they continue to perform at that level. It means that I'm not exonerating for them. I'm not whitewashing it. It's a blight on them. It's a blight on the history of the game. But Jose Altuve is a great hitter. Bregman is a great player. They're a well-run group. And I just want to kind of say, hey, they did their time. It doesn't go away. It's on the permanent record, but they've outrun it.
Yeah, that's funny you brought up Cano. What would that have been like if the Astros did the trash can thing again? That would have been something else.
Yes.
See that again. I don't think they had that option, but they didn't do it, and they played great without the trash can, and they have great players. And you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, they're not in the World Series as they were last year. It's the Rangers and Diamondbacks. If you stick with the show, a podcast from the New York Post, we'll continue to talk about that. We'll begin all the off-season work as we move forward. We always thank Andrew Hartz and Jake Brown, our producers, for helping us get through the show week after week. Don't forget, this show drops on the Yes app. We're doing the show Wednesday this week, so it'll be Thursday at about noon. Please give that a look. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate, review, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. It sure helps. And John, I'll see you in Dallas, and we'll be back next Tuesday on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.